Yeah, I actually saw the Mean Girls musical at the Pantages Theater about a year ago, but I will admit I had not seen the original Lindsay Lohan movie until earlier today. Yeah, I know, crazy, right? It's considered a classic among high school comedies, but it managed to slip under my radar until just earlier today to prep for this new one, which I just got back from seeing. So fetch, let's talk about it. First movie review of 2024. Mean Girls. So yeah, we have a new adaptation of Mean Girls. Let's just stop and appreciate the fact that this is a movie based on a show, based on a movie, based on a book. Actually, not unlike the last movie I reviewed. How about that? Yeah, this is a cinematic adaptation of the Broadway musical adaptation of Mean Girls, in which we have Katie Heron. She is transferring from being homeschooled to public high school, and it's got the whole social hierarchy thing going on. Katie makes it in with the cool, popular Mean Girls, known as the Plastics, and from there we have plotting and scheming and backstabbing and comedy and musical numbers.
Get in, loser.
And I'm sure you've assessed by now, I'm not nostalgically attached to Mean Girls by any means. I know a lot of people are. My friend who I saw this with, she is. But I just am not, so I get to review this movie objectively. And the story of Mean Girls, by all mediums I've seen them, the original movie, the stage show, and now this new movie, I think it's okay. Alright, Angari Rice, that's how you pronounce her name. She plays Katie. You might recall this actress as Betty Brant in the MCU Spider-Man movies. Who knew she could sing? I thought she was actually pretty good in this role. I mean, I don't see this performance going down as iconic as Lindsay Lohan's performance in the original film 20 years ago, but she did do the job pretty well, because she does have that awkward quality about her. She even did as Betty Brant, like in Spider-Man Homecoming when she was doing those high school morning reports. That awkward high school comedy vibe works more for Mean Girls than for Spider-Man, I feel. I thought this iteration of Katie Heron was solid. But then, of course, there is the Queen Bitch.
My name is Regina George.
Renee Rapp as Regina George completely crushed it. Which actually makes sense since she has played that role on Broadway before. She was a fan favorite, I found, so yeah, the fact that they got her for this movie must have really pleased those fans, and she knocked it out of the park. Cause yeah, Regina George, she is a mythic bitch. Walking around all hot and sexy like she owns the place, like Rachel McAdams did 20 years ago. Although if we're talking about girls being sexy in this movie, the girl who played Karen, the Amanda Seyfried character in this movie, she's out of control. Moving on though to the male lead in the story, Aaron Samuels, played in this movie by Christopher Briney. His acting, no, didn't work for me. And it wasn't just the fact that he looks like a Disney Channel star from the early 2000s, but just his acting in general, his delivery of his lines. I didn't think it was good. You know this character's gonna be the love interest. He and Katie have something going on, but he has a history with Regina George. There's a scene where he gets mad at Katie and he yells something at her. I was like, that's the best he could do? That's the take they went with? Yeah, it seemed pretty CW worthy in my eyes. Sorry dude, I want to see you get better. I love your career to flourish. This just wasn't it for you. I will say though, Janice, played in this movie by Auli'i Cravalho. You know I've always been a fan of her since she was the voice of Moana. And yeah, she killed it in this movie. I loved her. And Damien, played by Jaquel Spivey, big Broadway star. These two are like the cool kids who want to help Katie out through this whole thing. They're actually my favorite characters in this whole story because they are the relatable ones. And I want to talk about Auli'i Cravalho because she does steal it, but it feels wrong because the guy who played Damien, Jaquel Spivey, he stole it as well. He did just as good of a job, but I want to say this about Auli'i Cravalho. The character Janice, who was played by Lizzie Kaplan in the original movie, but in the original Broadway cast of the show, she was played by Barrett Wilbert Weed, who was Veronica Sawyer in the original off-Broadway cast of Heathers the Musical. So connecting those dots, I just want to put it out there. If Heathers the Musical ever gets a cinematic adaptation like Mean Girls did, can we have Auli'i Cravalho play Veronica? Because I think she'd be perfect casting. That's it. That's all I want to say about that. Tina Fey is back in this movie. She reprises the role she played 20 years ago, Mrs. Norbury. She also penned the screenplay for both movies and the show. For all intents and purposes, Mean Girls is her baby. And surprisingly, even she had a couple of moments that stood out to me in this movie. You can easily tell how passionate she is about this story, and I want to give her all sorts of props. So alright, that was a lot of talking about the cast and the characters. Let's talk about the story of the movie now. Cause like I said, the story of Mean Girls to me has always been just okay, and that's because it is just a basic high school popularity story with mean girls and cliques and, like, who cares? I know this might piss off fans of the original movie, but it's true. Like, these kids are acting like high school is the most important thing in the world, and to them it is. Yeah, it's true for the time, but watching it I couldn't help but feel like you're not even gonna care or remember most of these people in a couple of years. In a couple short years, you're gonna be in college or somewhere else, and you're gonna realize that all this shit just doesn't matter. It kinda cracks me up. But then again, there are high school stories that do get to me. I'm not just talking about Heathers, but let's say The Edge of 17, for example. That's a great high school movie. And so I think the problem with Mean Girls is the fact that it's PG-13. I've been saying this for a while in my head, but I'm just gonna put it out there now. I might get crucified for this, I don't know. But Mean Girls is pretty much the PG-13 watered down version of Heathers. And I can say that because Heathers predates Mean Girls. But yeah, their stories do share some similarities. The new unpopular girl getting in with the cool girls and then shenanigans ensue. Except Heathers actually takes a deep dive and does some real shit there. What can I say? Mean Girls does not get as extreme and gritty and real as Heathers does. I know I really shouldn't be comparing these two stories, but that's what I've always done in my head, and this review is an entrance into my psyche, I guess. This is just how I see it. I mean, this movie's not bad. It's not like everything about this movie is downright terrible. In fact, there are definitely some pretty fun moments here. Mostly the musical numbers, which I'll get to in a minute. But all I'm saying is that Mean Girls is just your basic high school cliquey story about bullies and actually being nice to people and accepting people's flaws. Which, yeah, the story delivers that message very well. Plus, it's a comedy, so you're not supposed to take it too seriously. But I've just seen it done better. There is a thing that bothered me about the aspect ratio in this movie. I'm big on aspect ratios. This movie, or at least the screening I saw of it, the aspect ratio would constantly be changing from widescreen to full screen. It went back and forth so many times in the middle of scenes, from scene to scene. Like, it actually starts off like a TikTok video, and the height of it filled up the whole screen, but then it transitions not to full screen, but it actually goes from that to widescreen. It was kind of strange, and then it went to full screen, and then it went from there. I would be like, what? Yeah, it was strange. I don't really see why it was done that way. Not for Mean Girls, just pick an aspect ratio. And finally, let's talk about some music. The soundtrack. I actually did enjoy most of the songs in this movie. Like I said, I've seen the show, so this isn't the first time I've heard these songs, but I don't have the soundtrack to the show. I don't know it that well, but I read that they cut a lot of the songs from the show for this movie. Which honestly, it always bothers me when they do that. Like, Dear Evan Hansen did that too. So did In the Heights, admittedly. I mean, for me, it doesn't bother me because, again, I'm not that attached to the show, but I can imagine how fans of the show might feel about that. They must feel disappointed. Like, what if one of the songs that was cut was their favorite song that they were looking forward to seeing in this cinematic style? Yeah, that must be disappointing. I don't like that. Maybe this movie should have been 2.5 hours like the show is. Probably. But that being said, the songs that were in this movie, the musical numbers, the dance choreography, it was all pretty well done, and I was enjoying myself watching them. And some of the singing was actually live in this movie. That was good. Some of the singing was obviously not live. So yeah, just 50-50 on that. But enough rambling. In the end, Mean Girls is Mean Girls. If you're a fan and you love the original movie, if you hate Mean Girls 2, if you love the show Mean Girls on stage, then you're probably gonna love this adaptation. If you are not nostalgically attached, then with this movie I would say take it or leave it. I really like the characters and the acting in this movie for the most part, and the musical numbers were really fun to watch, but it's a high school story about bullies in which I've seen much better done in other stories. It's nothing special to me. For Mean Girls, I will say, wait until this movie's at a discount price, then go see it. But seriously though, can we get that Heathers the Musical cinematic adaptation now? Cause that'd be awesome. Yeah, I know we got that stage recording a couple years ago, that's all well and good, but I just love to see it as a cinematic movie. I'm just saying. So Mean Girls, the new adaptation, have you seen it yet? What are your thoughts on it? And or what are your thoughts on the original movie, or the original show, or the original book if you've read it? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace!